Well, good morning, everybody. It is Tom. After taking a week off, we're back with you guys. It's good to see you all. We've got some positive people this morning. Nina, good morning to you. Glad to hear it's a great sunny day in Pennsylvania. Ashley, beautiful day wherever you are, which is awesome. Good morning, Sam. Guys, I'm anxious to get going here. We've got a good session for you today. It's probably be a little bit of a shorter session. Next week might be a little bit longer, but this is week 37 of the Qnity Financial Roundtable. Please be active in the chat. We'd love to keep the conversation going and flowing, so please use the chat. This is week 37 out of 5. We were going to do 5 weeks, and now we're at 37 weeks. So shout out to members of the Qnity team, including Michelle, for helping to make this a reality. Also, we do have some sponsors, Aura and Vish. Thank you to them. And, you know, we're a little bit reflective here. So it was a year ago, Michelle and I were talking. And, I think it's safe to say, at least at this point, you have survived the pandemic because you're still here with us. And we can mark the time right around next week, the middle of March, where that will be the marker for 1 year. So next week, we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the last year. It's going to be a more involved session with more guests. We love our guests. Last week, we had a great guest, Phil Horvath. Phil, I think, surprised me personally and many of us with his wonderful candor and authenticity and vulnerability and sort of his experience and things that he learned. So it was really a great session. Last week, we have returning Trent Lang, who I stay in touch with on a frequent basis. And I just felt like it was time to bring Trent back. Trent will make you live in a couple minutes here. He's got some really good stuff to share today. So I'm glad that we're going to have Trent with us. Past recordings of these sessions, all 36 previous weeks, are stored in the Plan for Profit portal, which is available for those of you that are in our curriculum. I do want to acknowledge and give a shout out to the whole format. The basis of this roundtable is built upon a brain trust and collaboration. This is our wall of fame of members of the Brain Trust. We probably are missing a few of you, but there's a hell of a lot of wisdom that has come in the last 37 weeks, and I'm proud to curate these sessions with you. The 9-grid is a core Qnity visual thinking tool most of you are familiar with. It should come out in your invitation, so that's where you can create a mind map or keep notes, etc., from this session. And again, we do want to hear from you. Now, I've talked a lot about grow or go. And many are at a decision point in their business. Are they going to grow or are they going to go? And the pandemic's been an accelerator for many of you to move more quickly into many decisions, including looking at what your long-term future looks like. And there are many people that really, they had been thinking about transitioning their business, selling their business, bringing in partners, et cetera. And that's a very active amount of the work that we do these days, is help people understand how to bring in partners, sell a location, sell the business, et cetera. And so there's many in the go mode. Trent Lang, there's no question, is in the grow mode. He's not a go, he's a grow. And Trent, we might as well make you live here now. I'll stop the share. And good morning.
Good morning.
So thanks for rejoining us and being a returning guest on the roundtable. And I felt that we had enough to share with some updates that we'd bring you back. So you're in Wisconsin. Just give a few basics here. Where you're at, how many locations, head count, just a little bit of that background.
Sure. We're in the Madison area of Wisconsin. So we're in the Dane County. We have 3 locations. We started our first location in 2007, our second location in 2015, and our third location at the end of 2020. So we're at 3 locations right now, with the last one opened during the pandemic.
Okay, so we have had more people consolidating, maybe moving from 4 to 3 or 3 to 2 or 2 to 1, and you're in an expansion mode. And that is, I think, some of the things that we highlighted with you when we spoke last. But just a quick summary, because many people, I remember talking to you right around a year ago, and you were thinking about this location, and then like everybody else, you got, somewhat cautious and really was rethinking, as you should. And ultimately, you did make the decision to open up a third location. Can you give us sort of a brief summary of why and how you made it work and all of that?
Sure. So when the pandemic hit, we had already planned on opening a location. So we had all the plans done. We were very far into the process, and we put it on hold. But as we started to reopen and summer came, we basically put together a non-negotiable that said if we could put together a package that would allow us to open a salon in a very fiscally responsible way, that we would move forward. And that's basically were things that we never thought would happen with our lease negotiations, how we structured our debt, that type of stuff. And the stars aligned, so we went forward. Probably something we'll never see again from an opportunity perspective, but it was really, really advantageous to us, especially from a construction cost perspective.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of participants on here from like California, and you're in a state that's been a little bit more, the economy's opened up more easily. So I feel for our friends out in California that have some other issues. And having said that, I think your point of view is really important because, at some point we're going to be in that grow type decision, and you already put that stake in the ground. So the thing that interests me about our recent conversation is to get an update with you. And Sarah, I need to check in with you, Trent. I need to bring you back. And you were a bit giddy when I talked to you. And one of the areas that you were giddy about was your retail growth. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. I mean, I've got a few areas to explore with you, and this is also a roadmap for our guests. We're going to spend a little bit of time with Trent talking about his retail growth, where it came from. Secondly is filling gaps in his leadership team, as he realized whether you have going to 3 locations, that's a deep dive right there, going from 2 to 3, but really filling gaps in your leadership team. And then finally, planning and how that really has been a big feature to your growth. So we'll do it in that order. Let's start with retail, okay?
Sure. So I think to start with the retail, we'll just say that the retail growth was definitely enabled by problems that came up from starting our third location and the planning process that we put around it to solve those problems. That really enabled the growth that we saw in retail, or that we're experiencing retail right now. So we use our 8 seasons, and going into our first season, we decided that we were going to put a stretch goal on our retail growth. And our retail growth, we used our 2019 numbers and our 2020 numbers and put a 20% growth on that. So
let's pause right there for a second, okay? So let's break that down a little, because I know people are going to be scratching their heads a little bit. Let's break that down, your measurement period. And as I understood it from you yesterday, what you used as a basis of growth, why don't you get into the weeds a little bit for your growth? Because you did something really interesting in how you calculated that.
Sure. So our season 2 is running from the middle of February through the end of March. So when we look at our March last year, we started to shut down in the second week of March already. So it wasn't really, we couldn't use any retail numbers from March. So we used the retail numbers for the last 2 weeks of February in 2020. And then we used the retail numbers in March for 2019. And then we built growth on top of that. Then for our new location, we took our growth rate over the last 4 months and looked at what that estimated growth rate would be for that month, and then put an additional growth or number on top of that. So the growth rate on average was 7. So we added an additional 13% on our new location for that growth rate. And that's how we came up with those growth rates by location.
Okay, all right. Also, I've noticed a couple times that you've looked over to your right. And what I learned in talking to you yesterday, it's not like someone's walking in the room. You're actually looking up at the wall at the 8 Seasons calendar when that's your turning of your head. Is that correct? 'Cause I know
Yes.
you've got some of
Yeah,
this
you
on the
can see
wall.
I don't have much on our walls yet because this is our new office, but I do have my 8 Seasons calendar with all of the planning materials stuck to the wall.
Okay, cool. So how did you get that kind of retail growth?
It really comes down to when we started the third location, we realized right away that what we thought our scalable processes and model that we had in place for the 2 locations really wasn't as scalable as we thought it was. And we'll get into that part later, but that drove us to figure out how to plan better. And when we sat down and looked at the functions within the business and the breakup of those disciplines, it became clear that when we were planning before, we had too much on each of our plates, and we weren't planning thoroughly enough to be able to execute that type of growth. And what I mean by that is this time we're deliberate about how we educated each of our staff and when that education took place. We were deliberate in what our facilities look like to be able to make sure it was visible to our team and to our guests. And then we were deliberate about the financial piece of being able to incent to get that type of growth. So it was really it seems very, very easy looking back to say, just go into our space and you see all of the stuff that says exactly what is going on. And the transparency is very easy to see. But that simpleness really came from figuring out how do we plan better. And I think that's key. I would have never recognized that had I not planned better this time around. So
It sounds very, I call it systemic. It sounds like it isn't that you did some, I mean, did you do any promotions? I mean, did you?
yeah, we did promotions, but we've always done promotions. It's the way we did promotions and how we made it. I mean, I can do a promotion on 4 different channels and still not hit guests. But if they come into the facilities and it's in front of them in 3 different locations in the salon, I have a better chance of that sticking and being able to make that sale at the end. If I train my team right, I have a better chance of them introducing it at the point of need and making that sale. So I think the combination of doing all those things correctly and in that order is really what drove that growth. So
I'm not hearing about any magic bullet here. I'm hearing about just very focused execution. Am I hearing you right?
That's exactly what it is.
You know, so guests out there, participants, you know, I mean, I'm trying to extract like one little thing that you can do out of this. That's a great little takeaway and run with as many times we have on this call. But I think what I'm hearing from Trent here is that it's very focused execution and less is more. Is that part of it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
It's being able to communicate to your audiences, both your clients or your guests and your team, in a way that always makes it accessible and understandable. That's the magic bullet. They know exactly what's going on. And if they don't, there's always a reminder in some place that makes sense to them, whether it's in our break room, whether it's on their mirror, whether it's at the shampoo bowl. It's very visible, and they know what's expected and they know how to execute.
Okay, got it. All right, let's move on to gaps in your leadership team. And again, you're in a grow mode. And when we spoke yesterday, you mentioned to me that you really, when you looked at your business through the lens of 5 functions, and that's, you know, Qnity thing, 5 functions, which is education, it's operations, it's human capital, it's finance, and then marketing. Okay. When you looked at those in your business, what you determined was there are certain holes, that there was the point where somebody was wearing more hats than they needed, and you had to peel off some of those. So you made some recent additions to the team. And let's break that down a little bit. So specifically, there were two, right?
Yep.
Um,
So when we took a look at, when we first started planning differently, we had 5 individuals in the room, each had a different role, but we realized that if you break a function down, we had many people across many functions. So you don't get anything done if you have too many people that are carrying the baton. So we were very deliberate about how we split up those functions, and then who is responsible for those functions. And then after going through that for a few weeks, we also realized that there was still too much responsibility on certain team members. It wasn't possible for them to execute at the level that we expected or needed for the business. And that's when we decided, okay, we need additional resources to bring in. One of the resources we brought in was budgeted. We had realized that before we went into the planning process, and the second one was unbudgeted at the time.
Before you get to the two positions, I had a conversation with another client yesterday, and then I talked to you right afterwards, and they were looking at going from 2 to 3 locations. And one of the reasons that they wanted to do that is because they believed that going from the second to the third location was easy, and that's where the profits just started to roll out. And I said, that's not my experience. My experience is that going from 2 to 3, now I'd love to hear some comments from participants here, but going from 2 to 3 is not exactly easy street. And before we get to the two positions, let's explore that a little bit. What was your experience to go from 2 to 3 locations?
I heard the same advice that if you can go from 1 to 2, you can go from 2 to 10 or 2 to 20, whatever that number is. So I had the same experience. I had the same.
Not from me. You didn't get it.
No, I did not get that from you at all. So when we went from 2 to 3, and that's Tom and I talked about this a lot, we had a very different experience. Within weeks, we could tell that there was cracks in the foundation. And when there's cracks in the foundation, you're not the only ones that's noticing. It's your team, it's your culture that's feeling it. So we knew right away that we had to make some changes. And I look at it like this. When you have your first kid, if you're a parent, you'll understand this. If you have your first kid, you're figuring it out, everything's chaos, and then you somewhat get into routine. That would be like our first location. Then you get it, and you have your second kid or your second location, and you can apply a lot of the same principles. It's a little bit easier, but it comes down to you take one kid and I take the other kid, and you make that work. And that is almost the same type of experience when you have 2 salons. You have enough bandwidth to have a little bit of influence in each one of the locations. Then the third kid comes along, or the third location, and you look at each other and you say, whose mother-in-law is going to move in to help with this one, right? Because now it's very different. You have to sit down, you actually have to coordinate well, and you have to make sure everything is planned. And that's the same experience we had when we brought on that third location. It was like the third kid, and we can't bring in mother-in-law to run the third location. So what do we do?
It's a great analogy. I love it. I haven't heard it put that way before, but I think it's very appropriate. All right. So where were the gaps? What were the positions?
So the gaps that we focused on from a role perspective were operations, mainly operations from a consistency of inventory across all of the locations, and a consistency of what we call our salon advisor, or front of the house area. That was the first one, because that's really important to our business. And then the second one was our education. We've invested heavily in our education role. So we have education educators, and then we needed a higher level coordinator or strategic role. That is the role that we added. So our educators just didn't have the amount of time needed to be able to execute both the strategy, coordination, and give a great educating experience.
Yeah, let me clarify something you said. You said you invested heavily in education. You don't mean you invested heavily into this new position, correct?
Right.
Because when when you described your compensation for this new position, it seemed to me to be reasonably easy to fit into the budget. So,
Yes.
okay. All right,
But for
got it.
us, with our education, because it was unbudgeted this year, we took a little different approach. We used PPP funds to allocate towards this resource through August. And once we hit August, the education programs that we have in place will actually be generating revenue that will offset that resource. So it'll become a budget neutral ad for us, which was important when we looked at that.
Yeah, we've got some comments that I'll get to in a little bit. Carla Lopez, good morning, Carla. Thanks for getting up early today from San Diego. Guy LaRoute, she says 1 to 2 locations is very doable. 2nd to 3rd is extremely challenging. So, and then Robert Cromian, I see you got a question there. I'll get back to that in just a moment here. So let's stay with these positions, okay? And so talk about, so you got the education, it's more of a coordinator position, okay?
Yep.
And that is a part-time position. And how was your team about that? Did any of the educators say, hey, I want that position? Or because you went from the outside, and how did you find this person? It was through LinkedIn?
Yeah, we were looking for a specific skill set for this. It was more somebody that has been in the role, and ideally somebody that has been in the industry. And we actually had a few people we were able to find, brought them in, and that's how we went through that phase of it. But the question about did the other resources have interest in that position is a good one, because they do, and they did. But when you look at the number of hours that was needed just to get the role done that we're doing, and put that on top of the hours that they were doing in their current role, it was not a feasible option for them to do both. And I think that the key for us too was we want to continue to grow the people within our company. So before we did that, we sat down and we looked at different paths that we can take within the company and make sure that growth continues to happen to keep everybody excited and motivated.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's go back. We have a question here, and it's back with the retail. So from Robert Kerman, 20% sounds awesome. Congratulations. From what percentage did you start? You know, so let me ask you that. You went from what percentage?
Yes.
Let's look at it from what percentage growth and what percentage as a percentage of total revenues. I'm trying to read the
question. So
yeah.
Part of the reason for our retail focus is we want to be between 20 and 22% of our total revenue comes from retail. That's our goal. We were at 18 to 20 prior to the pandemic on a month-by-month basis, and we were at 14 to 15. So we're trying to drive that growth on the retail side. Prior years, we only had about 6 to 8% growth in the retail realm, and we always shoot for 15, and we could never hit that growth. It just was, I think it was, there was a mental block for us to get there. And knowing what I know now, it was just because we didn't plan correctly and set our team up with the correct resources to be able to meet those goals. We have team members that are doing very, very well right now that in the past have not. So.
Okay. And another question from Robert is, what is the dollar per guest? So basically retail per client ticket, just approximate.
Sure.
You tend to be on top of these things. So.
Yeah. So our retail per guest is right around $14
okay.
right
now. Okay.
So, and then it goes, we have different, our different levels have different expectations for the team members, but we're averaging about 14.
Okay. All right, cool. Got it. All right. So let's also talk about planning here. Or let me see if I've got any other questions. So you went outside, found an education coordinator through LinkedIn, found someone from the salon industry. And the skill set for that was basically communication, organization, admin, being able to, project management, someone to create the cohesiveness and the coordination amongst your educators,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
yes.
All right. Then let's see here. And then I saw what you did. I mean, so this person's basically 18 to 20 hours a week to start.
Yep.
I love that.
Yes.
I'm such a big fan of part-timers,
Hmm.
and because you can really bring in amazing skills at an affordable price. So I love that you're getting that kind of talent, and it's part-time,
Yep.
and give that person a shot. It might end up being full-time, but sounds awesome. Then on the operations person, so this person is full-time by your perspective, which is 32 hours, right?
Yes.
And I think the gap that you were dealing with this is consistency in the front of the house. You've got
Yes.
your advisors up there, concierge, guest relations, what a front desk, whatever you want to call them. And you really wanted to create that consistency and excellence in the front of the house. And you couldn't do that with individual salon managers. You felt you needed a coordinator.
Yes.
Okay.
We took a little different approach when we opened the third location, and for our front, we kind of we didn't tie anything to one location. So we made it like we took our phone systems, and they're now cloud based. That gave us the ability to have anybody work anywhere. We took the ability, or we removed some of the different responsibilities on the front of the house, which would allow us to either staff up or staff down quickly. And we also trained in a manner that we didn't necessarily need to tie somebody directly to our location. What that introduced was consistency issues. How do we consistently have people showing up at each of the different locations, which, and this is where it goes into the scalability. Each location we figured out was doing it just a little bit differently. And that's where I think this role was really important for us. If we put that under one realm of leadership, I know it takes it away from the salon manager, but it adds that layer of consistency. And then the salon manager is the one that's there as more of a matrix type oversight, just watching, making sure things are happening, but they're taking their direction from one person that is building consistency across any location. So we can plug and play those team members, because it's really hard with when you have we have a one large location, a medium location, and a smaller location. That smaller location is never going to have a ton of front resources. So we
Yeah.
need ways when we run into issues to be able to move people around.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's touch on, before we move, and I've got some other things to share with the group, but before we close your segment out a little bit here, it's the whole concept of planning. And, you're really focusing on your business model. Speak to that a little bit, because I think that is what you spend a lot of time talking to me about in terms of your success right now, is you're
Yes.
really getting very focused on your planning, 8 seasons and 5 functions. I know you're working with our coach Heath, but tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah. When we opened the third location, and we talked about the gaps that were in place. What really drove that is, as a team prior to the third location, we were talking a little bit more strategic. We were looking at business opportunities a little bit differently, and then we added the third location, and it became very, very tactical, very day to day, and we couldn't seem to get out of that. And when you have the third location and you need to make higher level decisions, you have to figure out how to remove that piece. So that is what drove us to figuring out how to plan better, how to define roles better, how to make these responsibilities set and executable. And now what we're using this for is we look at certain areas of our business, such as education, as a strategic advantage. And this is what we want to our leadership team to use to be able to allocate funds to that, to drive different sort of market advantages for us. So that's where I really see the strength of this coming out. It's a fantastic, when you can plan regularly, you can do a lot of that. It's repetitive. And now what's really great about being able to form that leadership team is that 20% that I want to call innovation that we're trying to get out of it. Because I think that's where not only do we get growth as a company, but our team gets growth because they have opportunities. Our team sees a different direction for the salon and gets excited about it. So there's a lot of advantages from a business culture and market perspective that come out of creating a team like this. So
Yeah,
that's what gets me the most excited about.
yeah, I can see you're excited, and I do, to be perfectly transparent with everybody out there, I do remember a call from you where it was a little bit more of a panic. And so your excitement is especially something that makes me happy, because I got to see the Trent that had a little bit of angst around all of this. You know, you were like, oh my God, we've gone to 3 locations and some of this stuff just seems so evident, but you know, and so you're doing a great job with your business. And I think that it's great to have you back as a roundtable guest. And anything else you'd like to add, or anything else that maybe inspires you, or any other message to your peers out there before we wrap up your segment?
I don't think so. I do have a good indicator that came to Wisconsin over the last week. We've had multiple guests calling back in, celebrating getting vaccinated with a haircut. So I wanted to let everybody know that that's what's happening in Wisconsin. So keep the hope alive that that's going to soon be replicated to other areas.
Awesome. Awesome. Amanda says, congratulations on the growth. And I can't read the rest of her message, but check out the messages. So anyway, you now get your second $1 million light bulb. That means $2 million for you. So Heath is your coach, and I spent a lot of time talking to Heath about you too. Trent, thanks again. Let's give Trent a loud virtual applause. And Trent, congratulations on your success, and thanks for spending time with us.
Perfect. Today. Thanks, everybody.
So I have something that I want to share with you. You know, piggybacking on some of the things that we heard from Trent. And, you know, as we begin the process of visioning our business in a vaccinated world, are there investments that you're considering making in your business to grow and expand your business? It's a really great question. Moving into a vaccinated world, what investments do you need to make in your business? And they could be new employees, new products, equipment, marketing, et cetera. So it's a good question for you to be thinking about. Once you have your plan in mind, the next question is, how do you finance it and make sure you've got enough working capital in your business to work the investment though? Remember, you don't have to do this all with cash, okay? And keep in mind that the government has created an incentive for banks and borrowers to make traditional SBA loans during this time. So if you borrow $350,000 or less from the SBA, the lender is not required to take a lien on your house. In addition, there's currently no guarantee fees, no guarantee fees, and the SBA will pay your first 3 months of payments. After that, the payments are low because the loan amortizes over 10 years and there's no prepayment penalties. So this is definitely an opportunity to be in a grow mode. And I just want you to be mindful of some of these things. Trent shared something else that I forgot to mention, Michelle. And where is it? Okay, all right. So Trent, what you told me, and this came in right before the call. Trent said, I forgot to mention on our call yesterday that our additions were supported by PPP funds, which may be of interest to the community. Our operations role was budgeted for this year, but the education role was not. The PPP funds will fund the education role resource until August, when our apprentice program will pay for that role and will become a budget neutral add. So it's a good way coordinated finance played into how to figure this out. So do you have anything to add to that? Because I meant to bring that up earlier, Trent.
No, I don't think so. I think it was a way to show like there's creative ways with funds that are out there right now to continue to grow your business and not wait till everything comes back. Yeah. That will put you in a much better position a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. That education coordinator was a good one for us. Had we not strategically used our PPP funds to bring that role in, we would have been further behind than what we are now.
Okay, excellent, perfect. All right, let me take you through a couple things. Before I do that, who's on the call today? Terry McKee, good morning, Terry. And Sherry, that rhymes. Hi, Sherry. Hello, Sam J. Good morning, Sam Bracata. You were such a great guest a few weeks ago. Glad you joined us today. Robert, welcome. I think Robert Cromian, I think this is your first time. And Robert, I'm going to draft you for an upcoming session very soon. Nina, we already read your welcome. Good morning. Hello, Melissa. Mark Gonzalez down in New Mexico. How are you? Hello, Louisa from New Hampshire. And then we have Lisa from Texas. Good morning, Kip. Kip, I'm going to give you a phone call. We need to talk. Kuhn from California. Good morning. How are you? Hello, Kelly. Kate, who's been a regular with Qnity for a long time. Carla, thanks for your share today. Sean Stedman, nice to have you joining us. Joe Deanda. Hello, Joe. Good morning. Hello, Jill. Jessica, so glad you joined us today from Minneapolis. Hello, Jan. Doug, how are you? Connie, Christine, Casey, Kathy, Candace, Brock, Ashley, Anna, and Amanda Hare. Amanda, I believe you were the very first roundtable guest we had, or you were at the very beginning, so it's appropriate that I end with your name. Let us see what else I got for you guys. Next week is the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic and the You Survived the Pandemic session. That was the time when we went a little crazy doing all these videos to help people early on, and that really dates the beginning of 22 videos that we did, and then we dropped the videos and moved over to these sessions. So we'd love to have as many of you contribute next week as possible, so we'll be reaching out to you. If you are not working with a coach, certainly reach out to us for the opportunity to talk about Qnity in action. We've got great coaches, and the best way to do that is with a no-risk complimentary gap analysis session, which you can book by sending us an email. Guys, I just really loved this session today with Trent. We get to hear from very, very well-known industry icons such as a Sam Bracata. And then we get to hear from someone that you may not know, someone like a Trent, who has so much to contribute to the community. So this is about community. This is about financial sustainability. I love that we're going to have a little shorter session this week. I want to thank you for joining us. Michelle, thank you for all the work that you do here too. And let's call it a wrap. We'll see you next week. Thanks again.